Dr Shahridan Faiez is our guest on this edition of Cuba Cerita. He's a Malaysian who has travelled the world, has a PhD from Cambridge University, served in the World Bank and Khazanah Nasional Berhad, as well as advising African nations on sustainability. Yet today, he also chooses to spend time on local community sustainability initiatives such as Projek Perumahan Rakyat (PPR). Sama-sama kita dengar cerita anak kelahiran Penang ini. Pimai-pimai, Tang tu juga. Assalamualaikum and a very good day everyone. Alhamdulillah, I'm Coach Azman again here back with you for another episode of our podcast series Cuba Cerita. Gosh, today we're so excited. First of all, thank you so much for all the support that we've received. The number of people who subscribed and supporting us is really giving us incentive to really progress this much further. So today, under the theme of the DNA of nation builders, we've got quite an unusual guest. You get to know him a bit more, but very briefly, we've got Dr. Shahridan Faiez. And Dr. Shahridan Faiez is one of those chaps who, is really unusual in the way that he has had his life. And we'll go through it after this. But also, we're actually having this venue at his special place known as Bayang Coffee in Taman Tun Dr. Ismail. This is the way we could catch him in time. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam, Azman.
How are you, sir?
Alhamdulillah, very good, thank you.
Good to see you. Dr. Shahridan Faiez, I understand you're more known as Dr. Shah.
Yeah.
So you don't mind if I ask you to, if we can carry, sometimes I just call you Shah lah, boleh lah? Yeah? Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
But actually, I must say that to begin with, I did notice that you are more comfortable also being addressed as Shah, and maybe trying to dispel this title of doctor. Tell me, have you ever been stopped on a flight? Maybe the stewardess says, "Excuse me, there's a passenger in row 16C who needs some help, Dr. Shahridan. Can you please tend to him?" And that's maybe one reason why you've actually decided to maybe drop the name or the title doctor.
Actually, you're right.
Oh yeah? Okay.
So, well, as you know, I used to work at the World Bank, and which meant that I flew a lot, So
Okay.
we had to do all these long transatlantic flights to different countries, and because my name had the word doctor in front, every once in a while the stewardess would come up to me and ask, by the way, are you a medical doctor?
A medical doctor.
So
yeah.
sometimes it was quite embarrassing because they actually had a crisis and I couldn't help, So, but yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it's great to have you. Now, you know that this type of interview is really about exploring the person within. There's so much that you've achieved, and we'll talk about it also. But I just want to really start by understanding you as a person dari segi your upbringing. I understand, Dr. Shah, you are from Penang, and you have quite an interesting story about how you were growing as a child, and what impressions were left on you. Maybe starting with your family, your parents, and your personal background.
Okay. All right. Well, it is Cuba Cerita, kan? So I'll try and cerita lah.
Okay.
And no, if I well, thanks for the opportunity first of all, because it forces me to also look back and try and figure out, what really shaped the trajectories of one's life, kan? Yeah. I think if anything, Penang, Penang, the geography is a special factor lah. I mean, Penang, the Penang that I was growing up was a very cosmopolitan place. And Penang too was, you could say, one of the more urban, centers of Malaysia. And so it had a certain character, and the Penang that I was growing up in was also a Penang that was transforming very rapidly. It had traditionally, it had a port based economy. But by the 1970s, the port economy had declined, and a new economy began to emerge. Which was the manufacturing of microchips, and that resulted in you could say economic change, ecological change. So I recall the drive to the Bayan Lepas airport. When I was younger, you could actually see vast expanses of paddy lands, with the buffaloes and rumah kampung and so on.
Oh, kerbau also, eh?
Yeah. But of course, today it's no longer there. It's a completely urbanized, concretized landscape, right?
Your parents originated from Penang?
No. So my parents are also quite interesting because in a way they are part of the Penang story, and they are part of, you could say, a colonial history, lah. Yeah. My father, at a very young age of 10, was put onto a ship in the port of Nagapatnam in South India, and shipped to Penang.
And shipped to Penang?
Yes.
With other children?
Yes. So he and 7 other 10-year-old, 7-year-old kids were shipped to Penang because Penang was where, opportunities for education and later on, economic opportunities existed. Yeah. Wow. So you could say the Indian Muslim punya migratory route lah. That was one of it lah.
And this would have been maybe at the 1940s?
This was, yeah. So basically he left the British Raj, British India in 1947, and then he arrived in British Malaya.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. So
leaving your grandparents behind,
yes,
and all that.
Yes. Then my mother, on the other hand, she grew up in Batu Pahat.
Okay.
And she too has a very interesting background because her great grandfather fled, these very harsh policies of the Dutch, to Batu Pahat because Batu Pahat was where the rubber boom was happening in Malaya at that time.
I see.
So they drained the swamplands. That's why you have a lot of parades in Batu Pahat, right? Parit Raja, Parit Bengkok, and so on. Yeah. So they developed, smallholder rubber industries, and from there, through education, my grandfather became a headmaster, and then my mother later on became a teacher, and ended up in meeting my father in New Zealand.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. So that's a story of how people meet in the context of great movements because of our recent history.
Yeah. So your father asal daripada India, the southern part of India, your mother from Indonesia, and you grew up as knowing that you're Malay.
Definitely.
Yeah. MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Malay is a civilizational identity.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a narrow ethnic identity.
Okay. Yeah.
It's embedded with history. It's embedded with cultural values. And it's embedded also with your lived experience in this particular ecology.
So Alhamdulillah, your father had the opportunity for education, and of course, maybe, and then he built a career for himself with your mother also. Well, do you come from a large family?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So it's, in a sense, my family reflects, the kind of demographic change that Malaysia as a whole has experienced.
Okay.
My mother came from a family of 13 children.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Quite common in those days, I think. Yeah?
Yes. Then she herself had 5 children.
Yeah.
Now, my generation, we only have 2.
Yeah.
And I'm praying the next generation has at least the same or more.
Okay. So you grew up basically in Penang, and you, I understand you're from Penang Free School and all that heritage. But is there anything, now that we're talking along these lines, is there anything that resonates with you about that childhood that, in reflection today, is something that maybe has shaped how you thought about things as you were growing up? Maybe helped to shape, how you approach life in general? Again,
Penang was a very important influence because I think firstly, it's because of the rapid transformations that I experienced myself. So the ecological change, the socio-demographic change that we saw. When Penang began to embrace the manufacturing sector, and you had a lot of investments in the electronics. It began to attract a lot of labor from the mainland. And especially a lot of young women used to come. So there was this popular term called Minah Karan.
Minah Karan.
And of course there was a lot of social anxiety because all these young unmarried women were coming and
working in Penang.
And working in a new situation.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance. The Karan, is it current or?
As in current.
As in current.
As in electric current.
Electric current. Minah Karan.
So these factories were, sort of these new physical things, right? It consumed a lot of electric current. And people were doing, very new, novel types of activities. So hence the popular term Minah Karan.
Minah Karan. Okay, since we're talking about terms, you seem to be well knowledgeable about stuff. How does the term Pimai Tang Tu come to you?
Well, I like to think, so coming back to my own personal history, so like my father and the 7 little kids who were put on the ship to come to Penang, so many of them came that way. And most of them, in fact, come from a particular part of South India. And it's a part of South India where actually the Muslims are a minority. But they've been there for hundreds of years. They've lived there and coexisted very peacefully, harmoniously with other communities and other religions. So to cut a long story short, so because they came from the same general area or region, when you meet each other in Penang, immediately so and so is from this village, so and so is so and so's grandson, or this is a grand auntie, and so on. So it's a kind of Pimai Tang Tu juga lah.
Okay, alright. I'm going to refer to that phrase when I talk more about you. Okay, so fast forward, you went to University Malaya, I understand, and Alhamdulillah, you went to the Faculty of Science. Eventually, you graduated with a first-class honors degree in geology. Okay, somewhere along the line, there is a linkage to where you furthered your studies in later life. But moving from Penang, where you talked about all this development and what you saw, and coming to KL, what were the first thoughts that went through your mind about coming to the bigger city and experiencing that as a young adult?
Okay, so moving from Penang Free School to University of Malaya, and at that time I joined the pre-university course called Asasi Science. I think I did have a culture shock.
Oh, okay.
It was a very serious culture shock, I would say. But it had nothing to do with KL, the city.
Okay.
Rather, it had a lot to do with the course I was attending. Because in Penang, you could say I led a rather carefree life. Penang, you had friends, you had time for football, you had time for studies, and time to go on your motorbike, and so on and so forth. Asasi Science was a very highly regimented course. You had to start your day at 8 in the morning, and end it at sort of 5:30.
I have to vouch for that because I also experienced the same, I think.
So that was one big culture shock for me.
Okay.
Now the other culture shock was actually, you could say, my first experience of the tensions or the awareness about one's racial identity. So growing up in Penang, in a way you're not very conscious about one's ethnic identity. We had friends of many different ethnic backgrounds, cultures, and really, whether you were a Chinese or Indian or a Sikh, it didn't really matter. And we used to make jokes about each other's ethnicities.
Exactly.
Sometimes really mean ones, but no one feels. But when I was in UM, it was a time when there was this competition to get you to join different ethnic-based organizations, right? And then there were a lot of these debates, and discourse about ethnic identities. So that was my other, you could say culture shock lah. But then I also began to realize that, see, I grew up in a very urban environment. At a time when, at that time in Malaysia, you could say maybe around 3 or 4 Malaysians out of 10 live in an urban area. Malaysia was still largely a rural population. Now today it's completely different.
True.
Today 8 out of 10 Malaysians live in an urban area. Malaysia today is a highly urbanized nation. So when I came to University of Malaya, I began to realize that I was actually meeting people who came from a different environment. They had a different experience. And certainly they had a different experience of interacting with maybe other social groups. So I think that was a very important experience for me because one needs to develop sort of empathy for other people, and a certain curiosity, I guess, to begin to understand other people, where they come from, and so on. So UM was very important in that sense.
Now, I must say that something that really impressed me from what I know of you was that UM was maybe the first degree, but you actually went on to one of the premier universities in the world, Cambridge, to read for your master's and even later your PhD, which then led you on to do other things. Were you always educationally inclined, or was it something that you developed later on as you needed to progress? How did that all happen?
Okay, depending who you talk to.
Okay.
Yeah, some people you talk to would be quite surprised that I did quite well in education because I wasn't a good student. And in fact, in UM, when I was doing Asasi Science, I was always failing. And not only did I fail, I actually dropped out of Asasi Science. So after 3 semesters, I dropped out. I went back to Penang, and I enrolled to do STPM.
And came back to UM.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, I was able to do reasonably well. And I found my way back into UM.
But tell me, were you like one of those eldest sons whose parents aspired you to become a doctor? Was that the reason why you went to
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh my
So I was the anak sulung.
And
my parents felt that being a doctor was,
And your father was?
My father was a lawyer. And I wanted to be a lawyer. But he was telling me, you don't want to do that. So just like many others, we were streamed to do medicine. But but if you don't perform, you end up doing other things, right?
Right. But eventually you found your way into Faculty of Science, I guess, and geology.
I was lucky because I was able to do a course that was very, very interesting, and it really appealed to my, I guess, my disposition lah. Because number one, it had a lot of outdoor activities, which I liked. But secondly, it's very interesting. I studied science in order to be, in a sense, what I am today is a social scientist. And really, it was geology that brought me to become a sociologist, you could say.
Wow.
And when I reflect upon it, it in a way it's not surprising because, as a geologist, right, the thing you need to be aware of is that that beautiful landscape you're looking at, those mountains, they did not just happen like that. They came into being through a particular process.
All right.
Right? And that process meant that there is a history to how it came into being.
Yes.
Right? For example, the highest peak today is Mount Everest.
All right.
And on Mount Everest, you would find limestone.
Limestone? Okay.
Right? So if you have limestone, it meant that at some point in time, that used to be at the bottom of the ocean. Just think about it, right? So what was that journey, right, for that piece of rock or structure to move from the bottom of the ocean all the way up to become the highest.
The water receding over time.
So this is about tectonic processes, and so on and so forth, right?
But most geologists, they go into oil and gas or engineering, and the way that you're talking seems to be very much out of what I normally hear about that element of that field of science.
Right.
Okay? And then what? I mean, would you become a lecturer, or how did you end up, because I understand your degrees in your master's and your PhD from Cambridge was along the lines of social development, sustainability. Is that true?
Yeah. So my passion was on sustainable development. Yeah.
Sustainable development. Okay.
So because of the rapid change that I had experienced in Penang, one of the things that I was sort of really concerned about was the impact it had on the environment. And so I was sort of an activist, when I was young. And for example, we had this, with the Sahabat Alam Malaysia, with Consumers Association of Penang, we had a lot of campaigns to save Penang Hill, for example, to deal with the impact of pollution on the fishermen in Juru, So there were many issues that were beginning to emerge because of the rapid industrialization the country was going through. So I became sort of activated by that, And in I started an organization called Persatuan Kesedaran Sosial or SEDA, yeah. And the few years I was actively involved, we organize activities, events to raise awareness, about environmental and conservation issues. Yeah.
Really?
But what started as an interest on how to protect, the flora and fauna of our nation, very quickly I began to realize that it was not simply the need to protect. You need to deal with the social environment too, because that's where the sources of the threats were coming from. So one has to now to look at why do human beings behave in a certain way? Why do we formulate certain policies that impact upon the environment and impact upon people's livelihoods? And that's how I moved from geology to environment to social.
MashaAllah, interesting, huh?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And I guess maybe I'm just trying to suss out what I feel I'm hearing. It's because it sounds as if from a very young age you had quite an awareness of the surrounding environment. Maybe part of it also in your later years. But the way that you're reflecting makes me feel that, when you were in for example, it was the 80s, and actually I went to I don't recall knowing about this particular. Maybe it was after my time, but to be able to actually generate ideas and create ideologies around understanding the impact of sustainability and the environment, that's basically what is on people's minds today.
Yeah.
ESG is the big buzzword, and yet it has always been around. It's just it's never been amplified. Maybe I don't know. And of course, today you're involved in a lot of sustainability developments, and we'll come to that a bit later in this conversation. How did you end up pursuing your postgraduate studies at Cambridge? Was that also by plan, or was it by certain opportunities that came about?
Yeah, well, it was actually by accident.
Accident again? Okay.
Again, driven by my passion on the environment. So after I graduated, I had the option of, joining the industry.
Okay.
And of course, the most attractive jobs were coming from the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
But, my passion for the environment got me to spend a bit more time on social activism, So I even participated in so at that time we had the UN Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED, the Earth Summit, and so I was quite active in a lot of the peripheral activities for the Earth Summit. And the Earth Summit is actually very interesting because Malaysia played a very progressive role, in basically highlighting the importance of socio-economic development in the protection of our environment. So there was a kind of north-south debate going on, where the north had this very narrow conception of how to protect the environment, which was purely about conservation. So you actually go and put fences around forest areas and prevent people from going into it. without really considering why people are going into these important areas and extracting forest resources and so on. So you have to deal with the problem of social development, poverty. And so Malaysia played a very important role, and I was really. It was a sort of eye-opener for me, to look at the role of policies, both at the national level and at the global level. So I then found that in Cambridge there was a course that dealt with this. It was called the Master MPhil in Environment and Development. So Alhamdulillah, I applied. I managed to get a scholarship. Fantastic. And then that took me on a whole different trajectory.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. And how did so I guess your reading of your PhD was a natural progression?
Yeah. So going to Cambridge, you then start reading all this other literature, everything from environmental economics to social anthropology. And I began to formulate certain thoughts and ideas as I reflect upon what's happening, in my own country. And that really began the seed for my PhD project.
Now, somewhere in there or even after that, you ended up in the World Bank in Washington. And you were there for a good 10 plus 13 years or so.
13 years, yes.
Wow. So you, in a way, that was, I would say, like, you've arrived in many ways. But tell us a bit more. What is it exactly that you can pick up now in reflection about what was those key experiences, and maybe at the end of that, you actually came back to Malaysia. Tell me a bit more, because normally what I do feel is that, especially for that length of time, professionals who do find their way to be working and living overseas, they tend to build a family and a career and, in a way, a livelihood which is sustainable for them. I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but tell us, or your experience, what is it that actually went through your mind in those days?
Well, first of all, I guess I was fortunate in that it's very interesting, because I was, as an environmental activist, I was among the people who were very critical of the World Bank and IMF. And I used to participate actually in protest movements, 50 years is enough and all that, So, but when I was in Cambridge, a couple of things happened, basically I attended a few talks, both by officials from the World Bank, and also the president of the World Bank. He came, Jim Wolfenson at that time. He and Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize winner, they had a special event where they spoke about sustainable development. And I was struck because everything they spoke about sort of resonated with my own thoughts, and interests. And I felt that, okay, maybe it's not such a bad organization after all.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I decided to give it a try. I applied for their Young Professionals program, and Alhamdulillah, I was able to get in. And I was put in this very unique organization. It attracts very smart people from around the world, but also people who are very passionate about poverty eradication, about social development, and about environmental management. So I was really, really happy to be in company of really remarkable people. And it was an organization that placed a lot of value on knowledge. But it also places a lot of value on how do you apply this knowledge, in an effective way. So it was a huge learning experience for me. That 13 years is 13 years among the sweetest 13 years of my life, I could say.
So what happened? I mean, you're married by then, or?
Yeah. So I was married.
Family, yes?
I had my children there.
Okay.
And you're right. It's a very comfortable life. You fly on business class everywhere. When you go to your client countries, you meet with ministers and senior civil servants. They give you some respect, right? Because,
I can imagine.
Because we give loans.
Yeah.
and you do very interesting work, you know. But a couple of things sort of were nagging at me. One was I was based in Washington DC, and Washington DC is a long way away from Malaysia. You know, so there was this thing about being away from your family, lah. Yeah, especially my parents, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and then there was also this thing about, you know, I've been blessed with opportunities, and I felt that you know, there's a lot more I can give, you know, I can offer, and especially to my own nation.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the other thing that was nagging at me, lah. And I guess the third thing was, you know, I was there's sort of this geopolitical thing, lah. You know, so I was working a lot in the post-Soviet space. You know, in the Eastern Europe, in the Central Asia, you know, in the Caucasus, and so on. And I was looking at the way, you know, the sort of global power relations were shifting, you know. And I was really struck by how it was so difficult for certain regions to find traction where economic development is concerned. And then in contrast, you see things really moving and buzzing and happening in the sort of the Asia and East Asian region, you know. And I got really attracted to that too, you know. So this combination of factors sort of brought me back.
Brought you back,
Home,
and you. I understand that you joined Khazanah Nasional for a while.
So I was seconded by the World Bank to Khazanah.
I see.
And I worked with Khazanah at that time.
And Khazanah knew that the Malaysian was being seconded? Or someone's being seconded, or happens to be Dr. Shah?
No. It was a negotiated thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happened was at that time Pak Lah was the Prime Minister, and there was this push towards promoting the agri-food sector.
Yes, I remember.
As sort of the third engine of growth for the nation. At that point in time, our food import bill was 30 billion ringgit.
Wow.
Yeah. And the and the sort of, at least at the national policy level, they wanted to reduce that. You know? Unfortunately, we've not been very successful. I think today is more like 80 billion ringgit.
Really? Kan?
Yeah. But anyway, so you know, the then Minister of Finance too, at that time, Tan Sri Nur Muhammad Yaakob, you know, met me in DC, and he, you know, persuaded me to
come back.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
orang Penang, jumpa orang Penang kat Washington DC. Amazing.
Yeah.
And
So
I can really tell you now. In fact, I hope that Tan Sri is watching, because I'd love to have him on this series too. Because he's just got so many stories to tell. So Tan Sri, if you're watching, please, we want you on the show soon.
Oh, he is.
Maybe I need to engage your help to bring him on board.
He is a fount of wisdom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
We
and
will.
he's an amazing speaker.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know. I'm just trying to picture this. So you had an opportunity to come back. You were supporting a national agenda. All these things sounds very noble, and Alhamdulillah, you've been successful. And maybe there are other things that you're doing. But now, Dr. Shah, in reflection, the drivers in terms of how you see things today and what drives you to continue doing what you're doing or shift from what you're doing. Can you maybe describe it? What do you see is important to you today? You're not old yet. You're not retired yet. You're still many years ahead. But from those years, those very fast formative years to roles, I mean, for example, I now know that you are also advising other nations also on sustainable development. Where does it end? Where is it going?
No, I continue to be passionate about sustainable development. What really makes me tick is actually putting sustainable development into practice. You know, because so I've got all these ideas, you read all these books, reports, you know, but how to make it work?
Make it work?
Yeah, and so that's why I've initially done a lot of it at the World Bank through the projects that the World Bank finances. You know, when I came back, and my work with Khazanah, you know, I was focused on the sort of aquaculture, seafood production sector. You know, and subsequently I've worked on digital economy, on what do you call it, on agri-food, supply chain development, on financial inclusion. There's so many sectors, right, where one can apply.
So I gather you are a thinker, you are a strategizer, you can visualize things. I guess you spend a lot of time advising and consulting.
Yeah. So,
But I mean, what's the level of satisfaction? Minta maaf lah kan. I mean, as a consultant, sometimes or often enough, you don't see what you're advising on actually materialize. How do you maybe overcome that sort of, I won't use the word frustration, but lack of achievement, or or something along those lines?
yeah.
How do you manage that?
Well, I've actually done both.
Okay.
Yeah. So when
Okay.
when in Khazanah, for example, I actually helped to start up
All right.
a new company.
Okay.
Company called Blue Archipelago.
All right.
In the aquaculture space, and we introduced a new approach, a new methodology for producing high quality, sustainable aquaculture products.
Aquaculture as in shrimps?
It was shrimp at the
it was
time.
shrimps.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got my hands dirty. I've done
Okay.
the operational thing. Had hundreds of employees built
Okay.
processing
What,
plants.
what drives you then? I mean, are you into really running large operations or teams, or are you maybe the guy who likes to idolize things or create ideas and
I think both.
Both.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
I enjoy working with talent.
Enjoy
Yeah.
working with
So
talent.
even at the World Bank,
Uh-huh.
we work with highly talented people across different geographies.
Okay.
Because our projects are in different countries,
Yeah.
and within those countries they are in different localities, and very often they are in remote areas, rural remote areas, and so you need to build a strong team, both in the client countries, but also in the headquarters, those who are supposed to help you. Development projects are always very complex.
And today, I understand that you're advising some African nations.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated with the African continent,
Right.
both because of the particular history that they have had, but also because of the potential, the huge potential to become an engine of growth.
Africa is a large continent. Can you just maybe share with us one particular example where, I don't know how it works, but you sort of turned up on someone's doorstep or was introduced, and maybe some significant achievement has been created?
No, well,
just one for the sake.
so one example would be the work I did in West Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And there I was providing advice to the then Prime Minister, Patrick Ashi.
Uh-huh.
And Ivory Coast is this amazing country. A lot like Malaysia, similar size, similar population size, similar geography. And in fact, if anything, that's where palm oil is found. The original palm oil comes from that part of the world.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now here's the interesting story. In the 1960s, Ivory Coast was producing palm oil at the same level as Malaysia. And in fact, wealth-wise, Ivory Coast was slightly wealthier than Malaysia. In the 1960s. Yeah. Today, Malaysia is producing 40 times more palm oil than Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast.
And Ivory Coast GDP per capita is about $2,000 plus.
Okay.
We are about $12,000 plus dollars.
Well, of course, there are very many economical and political reasons juga kot.
So here's the thing. So you have a lot of similarities in terms of your potential to grow. But the two countries took different trajectories, right?
Sure.
And today there are two different outcomes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of sharing that can be done. There's a lot that we can offer, to countries like Ivory Coast or Ghana. And you're right, they have experienced certain historical experiences, but it doesn't mean that they are stuck in those trajectories. The opportunity for them to overcome these obstacles and to grow, just like we did, is certainly there.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of work that we have been doing.
Yeah.
I brought a huge team of Malaysian talent,
Okay.
almost 30 of them,
Okay.
working in different sectors.
Okay.
So
Maybe you should also involve our football team, because Ivory Coast is, they're world class in terms of
oh
football.
my God.
Didier Drogba.
I was so lucky to be able to meet Didier Drogba.
Wow, really? In person?
In person. He's a fascinating... Okay, Didier, do you like Malaysia when you visited?
Of course, I had the chance to visit the country twice, and one was with Chelsea, and the second one was with the sponsor, and I had a great time. It was short, but the people were so amazing with me, and the welcome, and it was amazing, and I can't wait to go back.
Fantastic.
Thank
We'll
you.
make sure you come back again to Malaysia.
I will come back.
Thank you.
I will come back.
Is he a president of Ivory Coast?
But again, this is a guy who highly talented. He's an amazing footballer. But I think more than that, you can see this guy has got a passion for the development of his nation. And he's actually invested a lot in youth activities. He's very concerned about how to bring up the development of the country. So I'm very heartened whenever I meet people, who they've been blessed
And
with
they're highly
opportunities.
intelligent people, right? They're not just that physical and sports person, but they're highly intelligent. Wow.
But more importantly, they have talent.
Yeah.
They are intelligent, but more importantly, they are service oriented.
Semangat dia orang kan?
Yeah. So whatever they've been blessed with, they want to give it back
and they
to
give back to
society.
their country, where they're wealthy as it is.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. At this point, I want to bring us back to what you are doing now, and what maybe is the flavor of your current initiatives.
Okay.
So please share.
Okay. So one of the interesting things that I've come across, and this happened maybe about 5 years ago. I did a small piece of work for the World Bank. We were looking at the issue of urban poverty in Malaysia. And we found that if you want to find the urban poor in Malaysia, most of them can be found in our public housing projects, our PPRs.
PPR.
Project Perumahan Rakyat.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And here's the interesting story, we mentioned earlier about how rapidly Malaysia has urbanized, and when you look at other countries, when you have such a rapid urbanization going on, it very often comes with rapid development of slums, because people from the outside regions, from the rural areas, they start coming into the city, right? And they exert a pressure on the city, in terms of housing, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And you can see that in many cities around our region. But if you travel around Kuala Lumpur or Penang or Johor Bahru, you don't see that many slums. Or you don't see slums at all.
It's not visible.
And that's because Malaysia has been very successful in housing the urban poor. So we've actually done very well in terms of housing our urban poor. A lot of people don't realize, but in the 1970s, about 70% of Kuala Lumpur was covered by setinggan.
Yeah, that's right.
70%, or rather, I would prefer to use the word informal housing.
Or kampungs within the city.
Yeah, correct. 70%.
70%.
Now today, that's completely transformed, right? Most of them are now living in public housing, in our PPRs.
Okay.
So we've done very well in terms of putting people into sort of modern style housing projects. But when you take a closer look, after a few decades, what you find is that what they call the development dividends, the improvements in their standard of living, is beginning to decline. By a different set of issues. You could say a second generation issues. So in the past, their lives improved because if you want water, you don't have to take it from the well. You can just turn the tap and get clean, safe
Kan?
water to drink.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the first generation improvements,
All right.
right? Yeah.
All right.
But what's happened today is that because of an overall breakdown in the management of this public housing,
Mm-hmm.
you have very bad issues of rubbish management that creates public health risks, and various types of social ills have begun to emerge, and they all contribute towards the physical breakdown of the infrastructure of the public housing. You know, so life in our public housing today is quite a miserable life.
Ya ke?
Yeah, you know. So because of this, we decided to put together, and when I say we, this is Tang City lah. Yeah.
Okay.
We put together a program that focuses on how do we begin to connect with these communities to help them address the issues that they are facing in their public housing. Yeah. And to be able to do this, you need to have what's called community empowerment.
Community empowerment.
Yes, yeah. So what we find is that, you know, social cohesion is very weak or very low in these communities. You know, people don't know each other. There's certainly low trust. You know, and because of that, they cannot do what's called collective action to solve their problems. I'll give you an example. There's this Abang Grab that I interviewed, you know, this Grab rider.
Yes, yes.
So he comes back from work at night. He's really tired. You know? He stops his motorbike,
Uh-huh.
turns off the engine,
Yes.
and then he pushes his bike into the lift,
Okay.
right? Takes it to the 8th floor, and that's where he parks his motorbike. So I asked him, say, bro, you know, if you do this, over time you will damage the lift,
Exactly.
right? And when you damage the lift, you create problems for everybody who lives here.
Oh.
And his response was, you know, I mean, he looks at me, you know, half embarrassed, you know,
Yeah.
and he says, "You're right. I agree that what I do can damage the lift. But what choice do I have? If I leave my motorbike down
Habis lah.
there, it may not be there tomorrow morning.
Really?
Yeah. At the best, someone
Yeah
would
lah.
have stolen my petrol. You know, yeah. And that's my livelihood.
Yeah.
You know, so these are people from what's called the B40, you know, segment of society. You know, so they are economically, they lead very sort of precarious economic lives. You know, they can't afford to have their motorbike stolen. They can't afford to fall sick. You know, and those kind of things.
Dan minta maaf lah. Something like living by the days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I mean, this example of an issue. So
So
again,
this
I mean,
example is actually to show how complex the problem is.
okay.
Yeah. So when you, there's this sort of people sometimes see this as a masalah sikap. You know, they say,
Yeah.
oh, ni sikap no budak-budak buat
Budak-budak
vandalism,
ni semua.
and they spoil the lifts don't
Yeah.
work, right? And it creates a
Yeah.
problem for everybody. But actually, it's not so simple as that,
Kan?
right? It's all interrelated, you know. Yeah. Similarly, we found that because of the indiscriminate disposal of rubbish, I mean, people throw rubbish
Campak
on the
je.
corridor,
Aha,
out
aha.
of the window.
Uh-huh.
You know, it attracts vermin, rats, and all that.
Uh-huh.
Now, eventually, the feces ends up in the fingernails of children,
Oh.
and
Yes.
then it goes into their stomach,
Yes.
and you have a parasitic infection.
Allahu Akbar. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and what we found, we worked with some scientists from UM. They found that the incidence of this intestinal parasitic infection is higher in children who live in the PPR than children who do not live in the PPR. You know, yeah. And so there is certainly a correlation, because other studies have shown that children in the PPR have higher stunting rates than children not in the PPR.
So even their growth development is affected.
Exactly. You know?
So
And
so how do you? Again, I mean, there are deep-rooted reasons and issues behind all this, and I guess they've been around for years. How do you actually engage with communities? I mean, how does a doctor from Cambridge University engage with we engage with the community who need to understand change, or what sort of example of programs do you feel are most relevant for them?
No, to engage with them is not difficult.
Okay, using your charm, not good.
No, partly because I've done a lot of that, even from my work in the World Bank.
Oh yeah, okay.
I work a lot with community engagement. But I think the first most important thing you need to have is empathy. When you talk to people, you're going to hear a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems people are sharing with you. There's also a lot of anger, latent anger that they're sharing with you, because they live in a very difficult environment, and it's easier to point fingers at others. The official is not doing his job,
kerajaan tak cukup
these
membantu
people,
lah,
and so on and so
macam-macam.
forth. When in actual fact the problem is actually much more complex, because it's more systemic. So you need to be able to listen to them with empathy, and then to sort of work with them, to talk to them at their level, work with them to help them understand the different components of the problem. So when you break down the problem, it becomes a bit more easier to handle. And then we try to address them one by one, or at least the priority ones. And like I said, in the context of the people living in our public housing, what we need to do is really to rebuild society. Because we need to build social cohesion. If you live, this is communal living, you live together, you have to share the lift, you have to share the corridor, you have to share the car park space. You need to have a relationship in order to be able to share in a meaningful way.
So even building that community punya togetherness lah kan.
Yes.
I saw some of your videos and I was quite impressed about how simple you make the programs relevant to them, and at the end of the day they feel that it's not just about helping them, because these people have their own pride, right? But it's also about making them feel that they can do something about it rather than just expecting others.
Absolutely. So we call it program Kita Untuk Kita, or K2K.
K2K.
And what we try to do is to memupuk semangat kekitaan. A sense of unity, community. So that people then are able to come together and address issues, because there are so many issues. Living in communal living in the city. It's not an easy lifestyle.
No, Dr. Shah, I mean, it's amazing, and I'm sure if we could spend hours on end talking about all these initiatives. Now, something that resonates in my mind is that I know a lot of people that I speak to are high quality professionals, and have got a heart to do something along the lines of this social contribution, kan? Sometimes there are reasons lah. Everyone has got their own reasons. Minta maaf lah, coach nak tanya lah kan. How do you make a living? I mean, obviously, you were a high income earner categorically, and I don't mean that's your value, but at the back of people's mind is that I'd love to give back, but at the same time, I still need to make a living. I'm at the height of my profession. How does that resonate with you? And I apologize if it touches a sensitive chord.
No, I guess it's an important question, because how you make a living is also a factor of what is it that you actually need.
Okay.
Alright. And Alhamdulillah, there was a time when I needed more, because I had a young family, I had children, education and so on. Today, Alhamdulillah, my kids are sort of, independent, and so my needs are less.
But you've been doing this. You're okay, maybe dulu you were salaried by the World Bank and you had all the benefits of being able to do what you want to do, but this seems to have I'm imagining that this is an entire life of wanting to help and contribute, and with sustainability at the background, but again, I mean, it is what it is.
Of course, when you provide advisory services and so on, you do get compensated for it. And one has to also ensure one does not undersell oneself. So what I do is I do have my own professional rates and so on.
I'm sure you do.
But for programs or projects that are, are of social importance, I normally do not charge, or I give a different rate lah. So there are ways to ensure that you are fairly compensated.
Yeah, and not use that as a reason not to do something.
No. But I think more importantly is one needs to also look at lifestyle and living within your means and all those kind of things.
Sure. Wow. Dr. Shah, I mean, it's in summing up, I really, feel that you are unique. Alhamdulillah, our nation is blessed, and I'm sure there are many others like you out there who, you may not be as well known as a name, but obviously now that we know you, and hopefully the listeners and viewers of this program know that of your existence. But what I really find resonating is that this is something that has as good as been with you from the time you were a young man, and you've been able to live that dream of doing something around sustainability, and maybe the understanding of that grew or expanded as you also became mature, and now inshallah you are a subject matter expert, you are well qualified to advise, and this is as good as your field of expertise plus your playing field. So I really commend you, and I thank you so much for today, for sharing. Again, it's not about achievements and accolades, it's about what is it about you as an internal person that hopefully will also resonate with others in our audience who have a desire to do something that maybe doesn't conform to what we normally see in the general person, or is something unique, or it can be something that is also common, but I can still do something more.
Well,
so thank you so much.
For me, I've been blessed with opportunities, and I feel moral obligation that you need to share. So alhamdulillah, I hope my sharing has been useful. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
No, it's been a pleasure, and and who knows, in future episodes when we're talking about maybe something more specifically around your area, we'd love to have you back on our show.
I'll be
Thank
more
you so
than
much
happy
again.
to do so.
All right. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us again on
Thanks,
this
guys.
episode. We really enjoyed this conversation. It's not scripted, it's just a chat, but it's so enriching in terms of what we find out about the person from within. So we look forward to having you again. Join us for our next podcast, and please do support us, give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and whatever else it helps us to keep this thing going. Assalamualaikum, and have a very good day.